Today, we are staring at, at a puzzle. And I don't mean a jigsaw puzzle or, a cryptic crossword that you do on a Sunday morning.
No, not that relaxing.
Not at all. I'm talking about a literal mechanical contradiction that's been popping up in military headlines recently. It's a situation that if you just glance at it without any context, it just seems like a mistake.
It really does. It looks like someone in Pentagon filed the wrong paperwork or, clicked the wrong drop-down menu on a form.
Yeah, exactly. Because we're looking at a classic square peg in a round hole scenario. The United States has deployed a very specific piece of hardware to the Middle East, specifically to patrol the waters near Iran. And that hardware is the A-10 Warhawk.
The famous tank buster.
The tank buster. Now, let's just set the stage here for a second. Even if you aren't a military buff, you've probably seen this plane in movies or video games. It's iconic. It was designed during the Cold War for one very specific, very gritty purpose: to fly low over the plains of Europe and destroy Soviet tanks in a muddy, brutal land war.
It's what we call a mud mover. It's ugly. It's notoriously slow for a jet. It's heavily armored. The whole thing is designed for the dirt, for the trenches, for close air support.
It is emphatically not designed for the open ocean.
Not even a little bit. It's completely out of its element.
Right. And that is the hook. So here's the mission for today's deep dive.
Yeah.
Why is the U.S. using a plane designed to blow up tanks in a German forest to patrol the high seas in the Middle East? It just feels wrong. It feels inefficient.
It feels like taking a sledgehammer to go fishing.
That's it. It's like taking a sledgehammer to go fishing. Unless, and this is the key, unless the inefficiency is actually the point.
Or rather, the visibility of that hammer is the point.
And that is exactly what we're going to unpack. We aren't just going to list the specs of planes and bore you with engine types. We're going to use this really weird deployment to decode the language of force. We've got a stack of reports, military analyses, and geopolitical breakdowns right here on the desk. Our goal is to help you understand how nations communicate these huge, high-stakes threats without ever firing a single shot.
It's really about learning to read between the lines. When you see a headline about a plane moving from point A to point B, it is almost never just about logistics. It's a sentence in a conversation.
A very, very loud conversation.
A very loud conversation, yeah.
A conversation played out with billion-dollar equipment and, thousands of lives potentially on the line. So let's start with section 1, the hardware itself. The what?
Yeah.
We need to really understand why this A-10 deployment is so bizarre to observers. The headline says the U.S. deployed F-16s and A-10s. Now, the F-16, I get.
Sure, that makes sense.
It's a fighter jet. It goes fast, it's sleek, it does everything. It's a standard choice for almost anything. It's the Swiss Army knife of fighter jets.
It really is a multi-role fighter. You can send it almost anywhere to do almost anything.
But the A-10, why is this specific choice so significant? What makes it so weird?
Well, to understand why the A-10 stands out so starkly against, the blue water of the Persian Gulf, you have to look at its profile, its entire reason for being. The sources we have, they all describe it explicitly as a ground attack aircraft.
A ground pounder.
Exactly. Its entire identity is built around the gun on its nose, the GAU-8 Avenger.
Right, that's the gun everyone talks about, the BRRRT sound.
That's the one, and it is massive. The plane is essentially built around this rotary cannon. It's a 7-barrel Gatling gun that's bigger than a Volkswagen Beetle.
That's insane.
It is. It fires these 30-millimeter rounds, which are enormous. They're like the size of a Mick bottle, and they're often made with depleted uranium to just punch through tank armor.
So it's basically a flying gun with titanium armor wrapped around the pilot. A bathtub of titanium, they call it.
That's exactly what it is. But here's the key for this specific mission, and this is where the analysis gets really interesting. The A-10 is loud, and it is highly visible. If you think about modern air warfare, the doctrine, the whole philosophy, usually focuses on stealth. You want to be a ghost.
Right. You want to be the F-35 or the F-22. You want to be a blip on a radar that the enemy can't quite lock onto. You fly at, 30, 40,000 feet?
High altitude, yeah.
You drop a guided bomb from miles away, and you go home before they even know you were there. That's high-altitude dominance.
Correct. That is the standard way the U.S. likes to operate in the 21st century. Total control, zero visibility. But the A-10 doesn't do that. It can't do that. Its whole design is the opposite of that. It flies low. It flies slow.
It's a sitting duck for a modern anti-air system, isn't it?
In a full-scale war against a peer competitor, absolutely. But that's not what this is. Here, its slowness and its low altitude are features, not bugs. When an A-10 is around, you know it. You can see it with the naked eye from the ground. You can hear that distinct engine whine.
It's a very particular sound, isn't it?
It is. It's very peculiar. It's high-pitched, but also guttural. It's not the roar of a modern fighter jet. It's unsettling. It's an intimidating physical presence in the sky.
So if you are trying to be subtle, or if you're trying to do a sneak attack, this is literally the worst plane for the job.
The absolute worst. But if you are trying to send a message,
Then it might be the best.
it just might be the best. The sources suggest this represents a tactical shift. The U.S. isn't trying to be invisible here. They are deliberately moving to a strategy of high visibility. A visceral message, as one analyst we read put it.
Visceral. I like that word in this context. It's not an intellectual message. It's not a diplomatic cable. It's something you feel in your gut, not just something you see on a screen.
Exactly. It bypasses the brain and goes straight to the nervous system.
But who is this message for? I mean, are they trying to scare a submarine with a tank buster? That doesn't seem to track what's the actual target.
No, not a submarine. And this is where the square peg actually starts to fit the hole perfectly if you look closer at the adversary's tactics.
Okay.
The analysis we've seen indicates the U.S. is likely exploring the possibility of using these aircraft to deter a very specific threat. Small attack boats.
Okay. The swarms.
Right. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, the IRGCN, they are known for using swarms of small, fast attack boats. These aren't destroyers or aircraft carriers. They're basically speedboats, like Bogomars, armed with heavy machine guns or rockets.
So they try to overwhelm a bigger ship with numbers.
That's the doctrine. Now think about the physics of that engagement. If you're in an F-35 screaming along at supersonic speeds at 30,000 feet.
You're moving way too fast. It's like trying to swat a fly with a missile.
You are. It's complete overkill, and it's also psychologically disconnected. The guy in the little fiberglass boat, he can't see the threat. It's abstract. If he gets blown up, he gets blown up. But until that moment, he doesn't feel the pressure.
But an A-10.
An A-10 can loiter. That's a key military term here. It means it can just hang around. It has these big, straight wings, not swept-back fighter wings, which allow it to fly very slowly without stalling.
So it can just circle it.
It can circle right down on the deck, a few hundred feet above the water. That pilot in the speedboat can look up and not just see a dot, but actually see the plane, see the cockpit, see the gun pointing at him.
Oh, wow.
He can hear the engines screaming. It fundamentally changes the equation from there might be a jet somewhere up there in the stratosphere to there is a monster hovering right above my head.
So it's about perception. It's all psychological.
Precisely. It's not just about the capability. And let's be clear. The A-10 certainly has the capability to turn a fiberglass boat into splinters in about half a second. It's about the perception of that capability.
A tangible show of force.
It is. It says, we're here, we're watching you up close, and we can reach out and touch you at any moment. It's personal.
That's fascinating. It completely flips the script. It turns the supposed obsolescence of the plane into its primary feature. It's scary because it's old school and up close. It feels more personal than a drone strike from Nevada.
It's the difference between knowing there's a sniper hiding a mile away and having a guy standing in front of you racking a shotgun.
Yeah.
The sniper is probably deadlier, maybe more efficient, but that shotgun is a lot more persuasive in the moment. It triggers a different, more primal part of the brain.
That is a vivid image. Okay, so we've established the what. We have a loud, ugly, incredibly scary plane patrolling for small boats. Now we need to move to the why. Because the U.S. didn't just wake up one morning and decide to do this for target practice. There was a specific trigger event that set all of this in motion.
Right. This deployment isn't random, it's reactive. The sources are all very clear that this comes in the wake of Iran seizing commercial tankers.
Commercial tankers. So we are talking about merchant ships. Big, slow ships moving oil or goods across the ocean, not military vessels.
Exactly. These are civilian vessels flagged from countries all over the world. And the U.S. justification for this move, for sending the warhogs, it centers on a phrase you hear a lot in diplomatic circles, which sounds a bit dry but is actually crucial. Freedom of navigation. Freedom of navigation. It sounds like a bumper sticker or maybe a political slogan, but it's actually a pretty core legal concept in international law, isn't it?
It's a foundational pillar. It's been around for centuries. Basically, it means that ships, whether they're carrying Toyotas, grain, or crude oil, should be able to sail through international waters without being harassed, boarded, or hijacked by any nation state.
It's the concept that the oceans belong to everyone for passage.
Yes. And when Iran seizes a tanker, say, a Marshall Islands flagged ship on its way to the U.S., the American government views that as a direct violation of this principle. They see it as piracy, essentially, state-sponsored piracy.
And they aren't seizing these ships in the middle of the empty Pacific where nobody would notice. This is happening in a very specific, very crowded spot on the map.
The Strait of Hormuz.
Okay, we need to pause on the geography here because this is so important. We hear Strait of Hormuz on the news constantly. It's always the backdrop for these tensions. But why? Why does this one strip of water matter so much that we are sending warhogs to patrol it?
The term you absolutely need to understand here is choke point.
Choke point. It sounds claustrophobic.
Geopolitically, it is. A choke point is a strategic narrow route, a passage on land or sea that is difficult to bypass. Think of it like a bottleneck or a funnel. The Persian Gulf is this massive body of water full of oil platforms and tankers from, all the Gulf states.
Right.
But to get out of the Gulf and into the open ocean, the Arabian Sea, you have to go through the Strait of Hormuz.
It's the only exit door.
It is the only practical exit door for maritime traffic. And at its narrowest point, the shipping lanes are only a few miles wide.
Just a few miles.
Yeah.
For these massive supertankers.
Yes. There are inbound and outbound lanes, each just 2 miles wide, with a 2-mile buffer in between. It's an incredibly tight squeeze.
So all the oil coming from those major producers,
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia, Iraq, the UAE, Kuwait, Qatar.
All of it. It all has to squeeze through this tiny gap. Something like a fifth of the world's total oil consumption passes through there every single day. We're talking about millions and millions of barrels.
So if you plug that funnel,
The global oil supply is disrupted immediately, instantly. Supply drops, demand stays the same, and prices skyrocket. It affects the price of gas in London, the cost of shipping in Tokyo, the entire global economy.
that explains the stakes.
Okay.
It shifts the issue from being just a local military dispute, hey, you took my ship, to a massive global economic crisis.
Exactly. If that strait closes for any significant length of time, the global economy has a heart attack. And that is why the narratives we see in the media collide so violently here. We have two sides telling two completely different stories about the same stretch of water and the same airplanes.
Let's break down that narrative collision, because this is where it gets really confusing for the average news consumer, right?
Yeah.
You turn on the TV and you hear two things that can't both be true.
Well, from their perspectives, they are both true. On one side, you have the U.S. perspective. They are framing this deployment as bolstering security.
Bolstering. It's a strong, supportive word.
It is. They position themselves as the protectors of the global commons, the guardians of the global economy. They're the security guards keeping the lanes open so commerce can flow for everyone. They argue that if they leave, the seas become lawless and the world's economy is held hostage.
We are just here to help. We are here to keep the lights on for the world. That's the story.
That's the story. But on the other side, you have the Iranian perspective. The sources we've read note that Iran and its supporters in the region likely view this presence as provocation.
Which, if you look at it from their map, makes a certain kind of sense. The U.S. is thousands of miles away. Iran is right there. This is their coastline. It's their front yard.
Exactly. From their point of view, having a foreign military, especially one they have a very long and hostile history with, parking its assets, especially aggressive ones like the A-10 that are designed for attack right on their doorstep, is deeply destabilizing.
They see it as a threat to their sovereignty.
Right. They argue that the U.S. presence causes the tension rather than curing it. They say, you wouldn't be here if you weren't planning something.
It's the classic argument. One side says, I'm the neighborhood watch, I'm just protecting things. And the other side says, you're standing on my front lawn with a loaded weapon.
That is a very, very apt analogy. And this collision, this fundamental difference in how the two sides perceive the exact same airplanes, brings us to the absolute core of what we wanted to discuss today, the language of force.
Right, signaling.
Yes, signaling.
This is the part of the research that I just found most interesting, because nations don't usually just call each other up on the phone and scream at each other. They don't send angry text messages.
No. The communication is much more subtle.
Yeah.
And much more dangerous. They use movements as words.
So deploying a warship isn't just a deployment. It's a paragraph.
It's a paragraph in a very tense letter. In international relations, signaling is the art of communicating intent without necessarily firing a shot. It's a psychological game. It's a negotiation carried out with aircraft carriers and fighter squadrons instead of memos and ambassadors.
So when the U.S. sends the A-10, that is a signal. What exactly is that signal saying? What's the message?
Well, it depends on which concept you're looking at, because there are these two critical terms that are often used interchangeably, but they mean very different things. We need to define them very carefully: deterrence and provocation.
Okay, let's parse those out. Deterrence first. We hear this word all the time. Nuclear deterrence, conventional deterrence. What does it actually mean in this specific context?
Deterrence is the action of discouraging an event by instilling doubt or fear of the consequences. It's basically saying, don't do X, because if you do, Y will happen, and you really, really won't like Y.
It's drawing a line in the sand, but with actions instead of words.
Exactly. So the logic here is, if we put this scary, low-flying plane here, Iran will be afraid to seize another ship because they know we can respond immediately and violently. The goal is to make the cost of their actions seem too high.
So it's don't even try it.
Don't try it. It's about convincing the other guy that the benefit they get from seizing a tanker is not worth the risk of getting into a shooting match with an A-10.
Okay, and provocation is the flip side of that coin.
Provocation is the idea that the move itself invites conflict. It's the argument that by putting the weapon there, you're actually increasing the tension, you're making an accident more likely, you are forcing the other side to respond to save face.
Because they can't be seen backing down.
Right. If you put a gun on the table, the other person feels like they have to put a gun on the table too. Which leads to that idiom the sources mentioned, tit for tat.
Tit for tat. It's an equivalent retaliation cycle, right?
Yeah. Exactly. You take my ship, I fly my planes near your airspace, you fly your planes, I conduct live fire drills with my Navy, you do drills, I send an aircraft carrier battle group into the region.
It's a ladder. And everyone keeps taking one step up, and no one wants to be the first to step down.
And that's how you get into a war that nobody necessarily wanted. And this is where the language gets really, really tricky, specifically regarding how the military describes these moves to the public and to the world. There's a paradox we found in the source material that I think is really important to understand if you want to be media literate.
The routine paradox.
The routine paradox, yes. Think about it. On one hand, the analysis clearly shows this is a warning signal. It's a direct response to the tanker seizures. It is unusual hardware in an unusual place. Everything about it screams, this is special.
Pay attention to this.
Right. But on the other hand, how does the Pentagon often describe these deployments in press briefings? What's the language they use?
They usually call it a routine rotation or standard operating procedure.
Scheduled deployment, pre-planned movement, part of our regular ongoing commitment to regional stability.
But wait, that seems contradictory. If it's a warning, why call it routine? Doesn't that defeat the purpose? If I want to warn you, I don't say, oh, I'm just walking my dog, nothing to see here. I say, back off or else. Why hide the warning inside the boredom of bureaucracy?
That is the diplomatic dance. It's a very, very delicate balancing act. If you, as the Pentagon spokesperson, come out and explicitly say, we are sending these planes to threaten Iran if they touch another ship, you have just escalated the conflict massively.
You've thrown down the gauntlet.
Publicly.
You've drawn a red line in public. You've made it a prelude to war. You back the Iranian leadership into a corner where they have to fight to maintain their honor or their standing in the region. They can't be seen to be publicly intimidated by the U.S.
Right. If you publicly shame them, they have to hit back. There's no room to maneuver. Exactly. But if you call it routine, you soften the statement. You give everyone plausible deniability. You're saying, look, we're just doing our normal business. We move planes all the time. This isn't a threat. It's just standard.
Even though everyone, the Iranians, the analysts, the news, and the pilots flying the planes, knows the timing is incredibly suspicious.
Precisely. The expert take here is that while militaries do move assets constantly, and this could have theoretically been planned months ago, the timing coinciding exactly with the tanker seizures makes the routine label a convenient and necessary diplomatic fiction.
It allows the U.S. to flex its muscles without technically shouting a threat. It's a coded message.
It lowers the temperature while still showing the gun, and crucially, it gives the other side an out. They can pretend to believe it's routine too, so they don't have to retaliate to save face. They can just say, we note the routine movement of U.S. forces.
It's incredibly layered. It's like saying, I'm not mad in a quiet voice while you're slamming the cupboard doors in the kitchen.
That is surprisingly accurate, yes.
Everyone knows you're mad, but because you said the words, I'm not mad, we don't have to have a screaming match about it right now. We can just let it sit.
That's a perfect analogy. It keeps the conflict in the realm of posturing rather than fighting. It allows for de-escalation by pretending nothing escalated in the first place.
Wow. Okay, this mismatch between the reality, sending a tank buster to sea and the official language routine rotation, that actually brings up a huge point about media literacy. The sources talk a lot about sanitizing the reality.
This is a crucial part of understanding defense news. The words we use to describe these weapons and these actions, they fundamentally change how we feel about them.
We talked about the nicknames earlier. Tank buster, warthog. Those are aggressive, violent names. They sound like things that break stuff. The gun is called the Avenger.
They're colloquial, visceral names. They describe the function, destruction, but you will never, ever hear a Pentagon spokesperson at a press briefing say, "We have sent the warhogs to go bust some boats."
No, definitely not. That would sound completely unhinged.
So what words do they use instead?
They say things like assets, platforms, airframes.
We have deployed air assets to the region to enhance our capabilities.
It sounds so corporate. It sounds like they're moving office furniture or allocating budget for new laptops. We are reallocating assets from the European theater to the Central Command Theater.
And that is the point. It's clinical. It's detached. Assets and platforms don't bleed. They don't explode. By using this technical, bureaucratic language, they sanitize the reality of what's happening. They are sending machines designed to kill people, but they describe it as deploying capabilities.
It definitely lowers the emotional temperature for the public. If the news said the U.S. sent killing machines to the Middle East today, people would panic. But bolstering security with air assets, that sounds responsible. That sounds like you're buying insurance.
Bolstering is another one of those keywords the sources highlighted. It's a very, very specific choice of verb.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Bolstering versus escalating. It's all about the framing, isn't it?
Entirely. Bolstering sounds positive. It sounds strong, protective, supportive. You bolster a foundation. You bolster a friend who's feeling down. It implies you're making something safer. You're shoring it up against a threat.
But if you're on the other side, or if you're a critic of the deployment,
you call it escalating. Escalating sounds dangerous. It sounds out of control. It implies an upward movement, like a fire growing up a wall. It sounds like you are making things worse, not better.
So the U.S. press release says they are bolstering, and the Iranian state media says the U.S. is escalating.
And both are describing the exact same physical event, an A-10 landing on a runway. The event itself is neutral. The language assigns the value and the intent.
This brings us to another great term from the analysis. Posturing.
Yes. Posturing is essentially a performance. The sources define it as an attempt to impress or mislead. The implication is that what we see on the surface, the planes, the ships, the press releases, it's all part of a larger negotiation. It's theater.
High stakes, deadly theater, but theater nonetheless.
It's like in the animal kingdom, right? A gorilla puffs out its chest and beats it. A cat arches its back to look bigger.
They're trying to look big and scary.
Exactly. Most animals do it to avoid an actual fight. You look big, so the other guy backs down. You don't have to risk getting hurt. This is just the geopolitical version of that.
So how do we, as regular people listening to this, how do we figure out what's actually true? If one side says routine and the other says act of war, where is the truth? How do we cut through all the theater?
The key, according to our sources, is a concept called triangulating the truth.
Triangulating, like using GPS to find your position.
In a way, yes. With GPS, you need signals from at least 3 satellites to pinpoint your location. In this case, you need to listen to multiple, varied sources. Reading a report from Al Jazeera is going to frame this narrative very differently than a report from CNN or the BBC.
Right. Al Jazeera might focus more on the provocation aspect, giving a voice to the regional perspective. They might interview people on the ground in Iran or Oman who feel threatened by this.
Exactly. While a U.S. outlet like CNN might focus on the freedom of navigation aspect, and they'll interview a U.S. admiral about protecting the global oil supply.
And the BBC might take a more detached, sort of observer from afar tone, trying to explain both sides.
So if you only read one, you get a very slanted view. But if you read all 3, you can start to see the shape of the actual event emerge in the middle. You see where the stories overlap. That's usually where the facts are.
And the sources really emphasize that skepticism is your strength here.
It's your most important tool. You have to look past the press release. Don't just listen to the words routine or asset or bolstering. Look at the capabilities of the hardware.
Look at the square peg.
Yes. Look at the A-10. Ask yourself, why that plane? Why now? The capabilities of the machine often tell you the truth, even when the official statement is being diplomatic.
The intent is written in the metal.
The A-10 is there for a reason, regardless of what the spokesperson calls it. It's there to loiter low and slow and threaten small boats. That is a fact. The intent is written in the design of the wing and the size of the gun.
That is such a powerful tool for understanding the news. Ignore the adjectives, look at the nouns. The noun is tank buster. That tells you a lot.
That's a great rule of thumb. Nouns don't lie as much as adjectives and verbs do.
Okay, so we've decoded the message. The U.S. is signaling we see you and can touch you with a scary plane while calling it routine to keep things from boiling over. But what does this mean for the future? What's the end game here? What is the strategy? Where does this lead?
Ideally, from the U.S. perspective, the strategy is all about negotiating from strength.
Which means, what does that phrase actually mean in practice?
It means you want to dictate the terms of the relationship. The phrases that kept coming up in the sources were gaining the upper hand and negotiating from a position of strength. The U.S. wants to show Iran that it has the overwhelming capacity to respond to any action, hoping that this will force Iran to back down or come to the negotiating table on U.S. terms.
It's the geopolitical equivalent of walking into a negotiation and putting a big pile of chips on your side of the table. You're saying, look at my cards, you can't win, so let's make a deal that I like.
Exactly. But it's a huge gamble. There are major risks, right? This isn't a guaranteed win.
Oh, absolutely not. The number one risk is that you're just adding fuel to the fire.
That's the core debate we touched on earlier. Does this calm things down or does it make an explosion more likely?
There is a real debate among experts here. Does reassuring your allies, like the Saudis or the Emiratis, with these planes stabilize the region? Or does the proximity of all these weapons in a tiny space just lead to an accidental clash?
Right. What if a pilot makes a mistake? What if a boat captain misinterprets a maneuver?
When you have that much hardware in a small choke point, the margin for error gets very, very thin. We're talking about split-second decisions made by young men and women in incredibly high-stress environments.
A pilot banks a little too hard, a boat gets a little too close, someone fires a warning shot that hits something, and suddenly you have an international incident, or worse, a war.
Exactly. That is the nightmare scenario. And there's another risk, too. What if the strategy just fails? What if Iran keeps seizing ships anyway? What if they look at the A-10 and say, we don't care, we're calling your bluff?
The source material used a great, almost casual phrase for this outcome. The strategy didn't pan out.
Didn't pan out. It sounds so mild for something so serious.
It sounds like a failed business venture or something. Oh, the restaurant didn't pan out.
Right. But here the implication is incredibly severe. If deterrence fails, if the strategy doesn't pan out, then the implication is that you have to move from signaling to actual action. You either have to use the force you've displayed, or you have to back down and lose all credibility.
Which means military confrontation becomes a very real possibility.
So we're walking a tightrope.
A very thin one. And we're doing it in a hurricane.
So is this just a temporary blip? Will the A-10s go home in a month and everything goes back to normal? Or is this the new normal?
The consensus expert view in our sources is that this region is in a constant state of flux.
Constant state of flux.
That's right.
So instability is the only stability. That's a depressing thought.
In a way, yes. The U.S. and Iran have been at odds for decades. This isn't a new problem. This is just the latest chapter in a marathon, not a sprint, as one analyst put it. The faces change, the planes change. You know, sometimes it's F-14s back in the day, sometimes it's drones, now it's A-10s. But the fundamental dynamic of tension and competition remains.
So we shouldn't expect a quick resolution. This isn't a problem that gets solved.
No. We're looking at crisis management, not crisis resolution. Stability here is always temporary. The essential part, as the sources note, is realizing that friction is the default state in this relationship. Peace is the anomaly.
That's a very sobering thought. But is there a silver lining in any of this? Anything hopeful?
If you look hard enough, maybe. The silver lining is that, for now, it is just posturing.
Meaning they're shouting at each other with airplanes, but they aren't actually fighting.
Exactly. The situation is described as precarious, but it is currently contained to the realm of signaling. They are speaking the language of force, but they haven't started the violence of force.
As long as they are signaling, they are still, in a weird way, communicating.
They are. They are still part of a system, a very dangerous system, that is trying to avoid total war. When the signaling stops, that's when you really have to worry.
That is a fascinating way to look at it. As long as the A-10 is just looking scary, it's doing its job of keeping the peace in a really twisted sort of way.
That's the absolute paradox of deterrence. You prepare for war to prevent it. You show the gun so you never have to pull the trigger.
I want to drill down a little more on this crisis management idea. It feels like we're constantly hearing about tensions rising in this region. Does the deployment of something so specific and, frankly, weird like the A-10 change the nature of that crisis, or is it just more the same noise?
I think it changes the texture of the crisis. You see, when you rely on high-tech, over-the-horizon assets, like, say, a Reaper drone controlled from a base in Nevada, or cruise missiles launched from a ship 100 miles away, the conflict feels somewhat distinct and remote.
It feels like a button-pressing war. It's antiseptic.
It is, but putting a human pilot in a cockpit, flying low enough to see the waves on the water and the faces of the people in the boats, that adds a human element back into the equation. It adds a margin of unpredictability. It puts a human face on the threat.
Because human beings can make mistakes, or get angry, or miscalculate.
Or get scared. And fear is a huge, huge driver in these tit-for-tat scenarios. If an Iranian boat captain feels genuinely threatened by a low-flying warthog circling his vessel, he might take a defensive action that looks like an offensive action to the U.S. pilot overhead.
And suddenly, routine patrol becomes international incident.
In a split second, that's why the language of force is so important. Both sides need to be fluent in the grammar. They need to know that A-10 flying low means back off, not I am attacking you right now. If that translation fails, people die.
It's like a high-stakes game of charades where the penalty for guessing the wrong movie title is a regional war.
That is a terrifyingly accurate description.
So let's bring this all back to the listener for a second. We've thrown a lot of terms at you. Choke point, signaling, deterrence, sanitize violence. Why should the average person, someone who isn't a general or a diplomat, someone just driving to work right now, listening to this, why should they care about the specific plane the U.S. is flying halfway across the world?
Because these terms and these actions, they are the code that runs the world we live in. We live in a globalized economy. We talked about the oil price earlier. A spike in oil because of tension in the Strait of Hormuz, that directly affects the price you pay at the pump.
So it affects your commute.
It affects your commute, the cost of your groceries because of transportation costs, the overall inflation rate. When you see Strait of Hormuz in a headline, you shouldn't just think faraway place with problems. You should think my wallet.
And it goes beyond just economics, right?
Absolutely. Beyond the economics, it's about being an informed citizen. When any government uses the military, they're doing it in your name. They're using your tax dollars. Understanding how they talk about it, how they use words like routine to mask risk or assets to mask violence, that helps you hold them accountable.
It stops you from being manipulated by either the scary alarmist headlines or the overly soothing bureaucratic press releases.
It empowers you to look at the chessboard and say, I see what you did there, instead of just reacting emotionally to the news.
I see that you moved your knight to that square to block my bishop's path.
Exactly. It turns a reactive fear into proactive analysis. Instead of just feeling anxious because the world seems chaotic and scary, you can feel informed because you understand the mechanics of what's making it scary.
I love that. Knowledge is the antidote to anxiety.
It really is. When you understand the game, it looks less like chaos and more like a very dangerous, very high-stakes strategy. Dangerous, yes, but understandable.